Good morning, all. It is January 27th, and we will call the Commissioners Court to order. At this time, it would stand, and we'll have each of us say our own prayer, and then after that, we'll salute the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I know that the Commissioner Vaughn will not be here today. Had a death in the family. He's in Houston, and the judge, I'm thinking, is here someplace. Well, we'll do some of these things prior to the judge getting here. Item number one, approval of minutes, approval of minutes from January 13, 2013, Pike County Commissioners Court meeting. Any corrections?
I do have one suggested correction. Item number 9, Santa Fe Railroad Museum. The agenda item is Commissioner Workia and Carrie Hood gave Commissioners Court a report. And if the minutes could be updated to reflect that I just introduced the agenda item and I did not have anything to report.
So noted. Other corrections?
I move the approval of the minutes from the January 13th, 2014 meeting be approved.
Second.
Have motion approved, the second, all in favor, passes 3-0. And item number 2, vouchers. To consider and act upon the approval of payment of vouchers processed by the County Auditor's Office for a period of January 8th, 2014 through January 21st, 2014. Items would be from checks number 153254 through 153497 and wire transfer 322 through 328 in the amount of $1,793,315.72.
I move we approve the vouchers that are presented for the amount of $1,793,315.72.
Have a second for discussion?
Second for discussion. I do have a couple of questions for the court. Page 9 of 28. The first item, Chief, check number 153372, the amount of $12,060. Firefighting coat. I just wondered how many coats were in that line item. And Carrie, you may know that. 12 total. On that same page, Carrie, a little above that, check number 153369. This item is $750, but I noticed there are varying amounts through the vouchers for different vendors. What would this line item be, and why would there be variation for that? The vendor is Burdette Morgan Williamson.
It would depend on the amount of work that was involved in the case. It's up to the judge's discretion how much.
And so, can you give me an example of maybe what that case might be different from mental health? I'm used to seeing these as the mental health line items, and so this caught my attention. So maybe Dave can shed some light. I'm sorry, I just don't see these line items.
I think that's on a guardianship case number.
Guardianship, okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, that's a guardianship.
Okay. Other questions I have for the court?
Further questions? All in favor? Passes 3-0.
Thank you.
Insurance report. So recommend. Treasurer's report. Speaking of our treasurer, I think she's going to have surgery. Is that today?
Yes, sir.
Keep her in your thoughts and prayers. So recognized. And item number 5, Santa Fe Railroad Museum, to consider and act upon the following: to hear a report statement from the Emerald Railroad Museum, Inc., Board of Directors, Commissioner Church, Dr. Jerry Michaels, PhD, and B, to hear the report on the status of the Santa Fe Railroad Museum and to take any action necessary.
I think these should have been separate,
Okay.
these two.
Take item D.
So take B first.
B, all right.
Each of you should have a copy of the audit in front of you. It completes the audit, and I would like to thank Mr. Wolfram and Mr. Thompson for their gracious cooperation with us through this process. If you want to jump to the conclusion, on the next to last page, you'll see that we did recreate the financials from third-party information wherever possible. There were very minor discrepancies, maybe a 10-page here and 2 others there. But, excuse me, otherwise everything came out just like it was in their financial statements. One thing to note, on the very last page, there are a few things that we did not look at, and that is their adherence to their own bylaws, their internal controls, or any inventory. Any questions?
And Carrie, forgive me, because the first time we saw this was this morning, so I apologize if I have naive questions at this point, but I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. So the third page of the document references Potter County income, contributions, interest income, and expenditures with a balance of $371. So if I'm following this documentation correctly, that is the amount that currently resides in those accounts, is that correct?
As of December 31st, yes.
And Dave, from a legal perspective, I think when we ended the last commissioner's court, we had not received anything formally that the museum has dissolved. Have we received
I
anything
think
such?
Mr. Wolfram will tell you that it actually has not taken place yet, they have not, so.
Okay, Mr. Wolfram, would you like to share anything with the court?
I'll answer any questions you have.
Has the museum dissolved, sir?
No.
Okay, so that was miscommunicated in the media, or? Commissioners, do you have any questions?
I'd just like to make a statement that I think this is the way we ought to handle these kinds of issues. We don't bring anyone before our court and try to make something out of which ended up being nothing. And so I appreciate cooperation from Mr. Wolf and Mr. Thomas. And I think just keep cleared up any questions with the court, at least I have on the finances. Thank you.
I think a follow-up question I make on this $400,000 of taxpayer money, in my opinion, is not nothing. So I do appreciate the work that Mr. Wolfram has done, and certainly Carrie and her staff, because this has taken additional time, but in the good faith effort for our taxpayers, in my opinion, that's what we're here to do. And definitely not communicating anything occurred through that process, other than we know where the dollars are, and that's where we should be able to speak to. So just to clear up questions that we've received, or I can at least speak to what I've received, of any donors or any money coming back to the county, is there any update you'd like to give us on that, or you will continue to hold those dollars?
We're in the process of checking with the Attorney General of Texas on the proper process to shut down a 501c3 corporation that has substantial funds on hand. We don't know how long that will take, and that's where we are now.
Okay. And Carrie, just for the sake of the line item of expenditures listed as $244,000 roughly, what was the biggest expenditure underneath that? I feel like that may be a question that we receive as a follow-up.
Approximately 65% of the expenditures were towards a contract with the Amarillo Area Foundation, and you will find details of those expenditures in the report.
Okay, so the line item listed above that where it lists contributions, I'm assuming that would be the work of the Amarillo Area Foundation, is the contributions through that process?
No, that line is the private donations, $200,000.
And Mr. Wolfram, that's the work that you've contracted with the Amarillo Area Foundation to do, is to communicate to the community about the opportunity to contribute to the museum, is that right?
A little oversimplification, we engaged in the contract with Amarillo Area Foundation for them to assist us in raising $2.6 million to put the museum in. And downturn in the economy, terminate that effort.
Okay, and Carrie, just to make sure I have my notes correct, 65% of the expenses were for the contract at the Amarillo Area Foundation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Wolfram, is it safe to assume that the court will be kept afloat of any progress from the Attorney General on the 501c3 status?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any questions on item B? Item A?
Yes, I had been approached by the Amarillo Railroad Museum and asked if they could possibly have a few minutes on our program, or our agenda. And so I did put them on. It was supposed to be a separate item than part of the Santa Fe Railroad Museum, but it'll tie in a little bit. But Dr. Jerry Michaels is here. He's a member of the board of directors, as well as some of the other representatives from the Amarillo Railroad Museum. And he'd like to just make a statement. He does have a packet here in front of us. Telling a little bit about what they're doing.
Good morning.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. We've been following the news on the Santa Fe Railway Museum and reading it in the newspapers. We've been to several of these meetings, and we were concerned about the effort to preserve the history of the railroads in Amarillo and the Panhandle, because it seems like, from what we've been reading, that some of that may be in jeopardy. And the reason I'm here today is to tell you a little bit about who we are and maybe offer some opportunities to this project and to preserve some of this history. Amarillo Railroad Museum is a 501c3 organization, and we're dedicated to preserving the Texas Panhandle's railroad heritage. We began in 1990 as the Amarillo Model Railroad Association, and so we'll be 24 years old this May. Some of you may remember that we used to put on Christmas shows at Western Plaza, and we also had train shows at the Civic Center. Once we bought our land, and I'll get to that in just a minute, we broadened our focus to include preservation of actual railroad equipment. And so in 1999, we reorganized and incorporated as the Amarillo Railroad Museum. We own 12.5 acres of land along US 60 in Amarillo on the old TSTC campus, where we have a 5,000 square foot building, which houses our Model Railroad meeting room and library. We own all of our land and facilities outright, and we're debt free. We have 3 major projects that are underway, and they're called phases in the handout that you have. The first is the scale model railroad, which depicts the miniature Santa Fe from Canadian to Texaco with an emphasis on Amarillo. And the Burlington and Rock Island railroads, which used to exist in Amarillo, are also represented to a lesser degree. And the layout will represent over 200 miles of railroads in the canyon. The second is the acquisition and preservation of railroad equipment and facilities, or artifacts. We have preserved a helium car that was donated to us by the Bureau of Mines, and the White Train Nuclear Weapons Transport, which was donated by the U.S. Department of Energy, and that includes an operating locomotive. We also preserved the Santa Fe Railway's dispatching center equipment, which used to be located on the upper floors of the Santa Fe building. And we believe that this phase of our organization or our projects is the area where we could mesh with the objectives of the Santa Fe Railway Museum. There are opportunities to preserve additional items, but as time goes on, more and more of these artifacts are lost and destroyed. If you're looking at old stock cars, let's say, for example, there's not a whole lot of them left because there's no stock industry on the railroad anymore. But we were really thrilled to read that the Santa Fe Railway Museum had preserved over 20,000 artifacts. That's just an incredible collection by anyone's standard. And the third is the development of our property into a park-like environment where people can come out and learn about railroad history and also just enjoy the area. The Burlington Northern Santa Fe main line runs just to the north of our property on the other side of US 60. And it provides a great way to safely come out and watch trains that go by each day. That may sound a little bit unusual, who goes out and just watches trains all day long, but really there are a lot of people that like to watch trains. And these days, with all the additional security that we have, it's difficult to find a place to do that. And, but our property is a great place to come and do that securely and safely. You're not up on the tracks, danger of trains and things like that. We also have a large scale G-scale. This is the kind of railroad equipment you run under your Christmas tree. We have an outdoor layout of G-scale, and that's a great attraction for young kids because they can come out and run this equipment. And that's kind of who we are and what we have. And there are details of those projects, and there's photographs in the handouts that we provided you. The second topic is what we can offer and where we can go from here. Our main strength is the fact that we have land. We have a good amount of it, 12.5 acres. And we think it could be developed into a showcase railroad museum. There actually is more land that could be acquired if it was necessary also. We aren't located in downtown Amarillo, but we kind of think that's a good thing because an active museum would expand over time. We don't think our location is a problem if we offer great experience to our visitors. We've had visitors from all over Texas, from all over the US, and a number of foreign countries. Just recently, we had people visiting from Spain. Many large cities such as Dallas, El Paso, and Houston in Texas, and also Oklahoma City and Denver have had railroad museums in their downtown areas. But all of them have had to move because of surrounding development and there was no way to expand. And this would not happen at our location. We're open to any plans to develop the museum on our property. We know it will be a long-term project, and we want to work with the county and the city and the members of the Santa Fe Railway Museum to achieve these goals. Just to toss out a few ideas of what we think we could do or could be done. A new building could be constructed on our property to house and display the artifacts acquired by the Santa Fe Railway Museum. And this seems like a great way that we could work with these folks. We need to restore our existing railroad equipment and actively seek equipment representing the roles of the railroad in our history in the Panhandle. And that's kind of been one of our focuses all along, is we wanted to get real railroad equipment that represented what the railroads were to the surrounding area. And this could be things like a stock car to represent the cattle industry, a refrigerator car to represent all the perishable fruit and vegetable traffic that used to come through Amarillo. We used to ice over 1,000 cars a day coming through Amarillo. That's all not here anymore, but it is a part of our history. A tank car to represent the oil boom from the 1920s, or even just a plain old box car and put up the appropriate signs and stuff to say this is the way most people got all of their merchandise and goods 75 to 100 years ago. The railroad was very important. Less emphasis today, but at one time it was integral to businesses. And we also need a switch installed to connect us up to the BNSF to get equipment into our property. We think we can combine scale model railroading, real railroad equipment, and displayed artifacts to provide an interpretive and interactive experience for our visitors. And with our library and with the preserved artifacts we have, we can provide resources for historical research on our railroad heritage. Although we've been working at our goals for 24 years, we are novices really, and we really are when it comes to dealing with the political and logistical aspects of an undertaking of a project this size. We're not asking to be the center of attention in this project, but we want to collaborate and cooperate to make the Railroad Museum a reality. We can offer resources to this project, and we consider it a really great success today if we can do nothing more than arrange a future meeting with people who would be interested and responsible for how this project's being carried out. We'd just like to discuss this in a lot more detail, and if we have more time than we do today. And that's really about it, and thank you for the opportunity, and if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Dr. Mike,
Quite informative. Thank you very much for your input.
Thank you.
I just have a follow-up question. Can you help me understand how you're different than the Santa Fe Museum that is currently in existence, or at least contractually today?
Well, I guess the main difference that we have is that we started off as a model railroad group to represent the history of the railroads in miniature. We started quite a bit before, I believe, the Santa Fe Railway Museum started. I'm not exactly sure. But again, I think some of it, we were kind of off on our own. We are a tax-exempt organization, but we've been kind of independent. We had some, and we can talk with Walter about this too. We had some very slight contact with them, and at one time, there was it kind of got around that we were going to build a model railroad in the express agency depot one time, but that really never was agreed to. And we talked about, we had all this land, and we had it before the museum started. And so we really didn't have an interest in tearing everything up out there and coming into town. And so I guess we kind of went our own way, so there really wasn't a lot of collaboration or cooperation up to this point.
Okay, yeah, I was just interested with the timing, the years that you shared of why that collaboration didn't happen originally. And I'm just referencing the contract point back in 2006.
I honestly don't know the ins and outs of that. I know I can say this, and maybe it wasn't, maybe this is just out of ignorance, but we weren't contacted about becoming an integral part of this. When they've had the original meetings up in the Santa Fe building, when they're talking about what they were going to do up there as far as creating a museum, we did have a presence there. And we offered a lot of suggestions as to what could be done. And if I remember correctly, even to the point where we were saying, we do have this land out here, we could maybe do something cooperative where you'd have actual railroad equipment out there, scale model railroad, and the museum with the artifacts in the Santa Fe building. But nothing really ever came about that. And then, as Walter said, when the recession hit, a lot of that just kind of faded away. There weren't any more meetings, or at least we weren't being asked to come to those meetings.
Okay.
There's a story in the paper about possible passenger trains coming back through. How will that affect your organization?
That wouldn't affect our organization in any way, although, I mean, it may have some renewed interest in railroads in Amarillo. If that would happen, we'd have one passenger train each way each day. So it wouldn't be like become this bustling passenger railroad facility here, but I don't know. I guess there could be some opportunities.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Deputy. I went out Saturday and had a tour, and Mr. Roth took me around and showed me. And it's very interesting to learn about the history. When they get that completed out there, really a neat place to go.
And I'm a commissioner, I also had the opportunity to take a tour. It was certainly a sight to see with what's been developed, and certainly in the beginning phases, but definitely good to see.
May I comment? If you have not been out to their facility, you need to go. It is a real treat. They did not take an old building and refurbish it. They designed and built their own building, and it's quite stunning. I recommend it to go. This is a group of wonderful people, and it ends up that you end up with too many artifacts. It's all said and done. Don't let them get away. You turn them over to these people. These are good people, and they have a lot of organization that can help this community a tremendous amount. I commend them for what they've done, and I want you all to go out there and take a look. It's really worth the trip.
Anything further? At this time, there will be no action taken. Go to item number 6. Property insurance. Consider an action on adding properties and updating the property value for insurance coverage as a result of the property valuation study done by TAC in July 2013. Starter.
Yeah, I'll set the stage again. It's been about a month, I think, since we talked about this, but whenever we first agreed to go on TAC as our insurer, they wanted to do an appraisal of our property so that we could bring it up to the proper values. I think the last appraisal we had done was in 2006, so they sent a third party to come out in July, and with Mike and that person, they went through all our properties, and they did an updated property appraisal, and they looked at every building that the county owned. Through that process, we found out there were a number of buildings that actually weren't on our property insurance at all. Also, there was a reevaluation, and some properties went up in value and some went down. And so what you have in front of you is a report that shows you the buildings that were not previously on our property insurance. And then also you have a report that shows the buildings that have gone up in value by more than 75%. Those are really the two big factors that are going into increasing the amount of property value that I'm recommending that we insure. So if you go on the recommendation that I have in front of you, it would increase our property value from 128 million to 156 million. So that would be the new property value we were insuring. And our premiums would go from 73,000 a year to 89,000 a year. And that's on a fixed rate that we have through the insurance company. So it's, that's just what we pay. I believe it's 59 cents, 5.7 cents per $100 value. So we had met, back in December, and Steve had talked to us, and so we got an extension granted until the end of January to decide what we want to do. So I'm bringing back.
You mentioned in your explanation that there was 3 properties in red that weren't included. I don't think.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
put those red.
trying to save money and didn't want to print in color. Okay, I can read those off to you.
I have them too right here, David, if you need them. One is the blockhouse, the detention center. I'm thinking it's the 5th one down, Commissioner. And then towards the bottom, county storage buoy, sheriff storage buoy. Those are the 3 that were originally known in red. Carrie, the one question I have is the line item for the additional insurance premium, since that is over the budgeted amount.
You have budget to cover
We do, how much is in that line item?
it. Our total budget for all properties is $500,000. That will include list and all our general liability.
You don't feel that that account is compromised or that line item is compromised with this increase? Perfect.
And also it's prorated, so we wouldn't pay 70,000 a day. We'd pay however many months are left on this year's insurance. So it would probably be about half, I believe, July is when we renew. So if we brought this property value up to the current levels, it would be half of that $17,000.
And David, my notes show that Steve's recommendation was to take them as indicated here with the committee, to bring everything in at full value.
It was, that was his recommendation. He wanted to be here today, but I think he had a conference out of town. So.
Other questions?
Guess we haven't discussed this since I've been on, except for in December. I've been on the court, but have we in the past insured all the buildings out there at the fairgrounds except the NC?
Yes, currently there's about 6 properties we do insure. Yes, we have. There were buildings out there that were never insured, and I don't know.
So these listed here were never insured before?
No.
And the ANC is currently not a building that's insured through the county, is that correct?
That is correct. There are about 4 or 5 buildings that the tri-state does insure out there. Correct. But the rest of them we didn't insure, except for the ones listed here that might have insurance.
Take action on this today or wait for,
I think we need to take action if it's the end of January. I move we approve adding properties and updating property value for insurance coverage on our county properties.
and we need to include the figures in here or just,
No, because it's a 5.7 cent rate, so Steve will get us that final premium increase.
I have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor? That's 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work on that too.
Item number 7, equipment trade-in and purchase. To consider an act upon approving the trade-in of 2 vehicles purchased with federal forfeiture funds and the purchase of another vehicle to be bought with federal forfeiture funds.
The sheriff approached me about some of his undercover vehicles. He's wanting to trade, excuse me, 2 of his undercover vehicles in for another one, and then any balance to take up his federal forfeiture assets. And so Those federal forfeiture funds, while they don't have your approval, they still have to follow the county process. And the county process says anytime you trade in equipment that it has to be approved by the commissioner's court. And so that's why it's before you.
That was one of my questions, and I'm wondering about the fleet, making sure that I'm following this agenda items. I don't want to be backup to go with it. So we're trading in 2 to get 1, is that right, Sheriff?
Yes, ma'am.
Are there issues with that, problems with that equipment?
One of them's old, the other one's been burned. That
Old
makes
and
sense.
burned, Sheriff?
If that makes sense. I mean, it's obvious what it is and what it's been used for.
And those 2 vehicles we are trading in, they were bought with federal forfeiture asset funds too. It wasn't county funds, so we're not funding that from the county side.
It's not like an arson burn.
It's not been burned or on fire.
Clarify.
Yeah.
And so does that fleet of vehicles fall within your normal inventory schedule? Your vehicles, do those come up during budget process, or you keep those separate?
They're separate.
Do you have any concerns, Carrie, from a fiscal perspective?
I'll make a motion that we approve these purchases.
Second.
Have a motion to approve the second, all in favor? Passes 4-0. Item number 8, the equipment purchase, to consider and act upon purchasing a speed radar trailer and from Decatur Electronics in the amount of $6,328.46, utilizing GSA contract number GS07F-2311 to purchase with federal forfeiture asset funds. Tongue twister.
Again, this is another purchase using those federal forfeiture funds, and because our county policy says that expenditures over $5,000 have to be approved by court, that's why it's before you. I believe it's a speed trailer, so when they can place it in separate areas in the county and it'll display the speed that the passenger car is going and give them a warning that they're going too fast or too slow. And they currently have one, and I believe it's broken, so they're trying to replace it with this new one.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it was bought with county funds or forfeited funds, but knowing that we didn't have it in the budget, it does come in very handy around our school zones, and we use that tremendously around those, and it does make a difference. So we've just got to get it replaced.
And so again, David, this is just coming through the court because of the purchasing of the bidding policy. I was surprised, that was one of my questions with the account that it was coming from, or court oversight. I make a motion that we accept the purchasing of the speed radar trailer per the contract GS07F2310 to be purchased from forfeiture asset funds.
A motion to approve in a second, all in favor? Passes 4-0. Equipment purchase, to consider and act upon purchase of equipment licensing to replace Windows XP systems that have reached end of life. You gonna have a funeral for those things?
There is.
Funding sources to be determined.
Right, here to talk to you about IT, like, tell us what you're talking about roofing now, I guess. Little background, little history on the situation. As you're probably aware, the county uses Microsoft Windows across all of our servers, desktops, laptops, all over the place. Each of the Microsoft products like XP or Windows 7 or whatever has a life cycle where Microsoft introduces it for a period of number of years, it's supported, and then they declare it end of life. And when a product is declared end of life, the manufacturer no longer puts out security updates for it. If bad guys find a way to hack it and get your personal information off of it, Microsoft doesn't fix it. Okay? It also puts us out of compliance with CJIS requirements, with DPS, with FBI, and so on and so forth. So you can see why it's important to not have machines past the end of life. When I came on board last summer, I posed the question to the IT department at the time, how many of these machines do we have? I was given the number of 20 or 25, somewhere around in there. So through the budget process last year, that's what we budgeted for. And we have it on our radar for the next 60 days. By the way, the end of life of Windows XP is in 60 days. It's the beginning of April. So that was the game plan, to replace these 20 or 30 machines over the next couple of months and take care of the problem. We considered it a closed matter. Fortunately, our friends at the sheriff's office contacted us a couple of weeks ago, and a couple other departments said, hey, we've got a bunch of Windows XP machines over here. What do we need to do about this? We back up for a second. The IT department historically kept records in spiral notebooks or legal pads, very archaic and not very well kept. We put some software on our servers here that goes out and looks for Windows XP machines. Okay. The numbers we came back with were about 160 to 180 machines scattered across different departments, all the different buildings, that sort of thing. So the last couple of weeks, I tasked my team with going out and physically touching each one of these computers to be sure that it's really there, is there really an issue, and what can we do about it to be sure we get rid of this end-of-life equipment. There's basically three options. One is to take the hardware and upgrade it to a new version of Windows. If the equipment isn't doing enough and it supports it. The next option is to migrate these desktops to our new virtual desktops that we started a couple months ago. We got started programming with. And the last option is to just flat out replace the equipment. And what you have in front of you is the figures that we came up with. You know, basically we've got three different buckets. One is to upgrade the computer, one is to replace it, one is to migrate it, and the cost associated with each. The reason that a lot of these cannot be upgraded, we found machines as old as 2003, 11-year-old desktops that were still out being used. We found a bunch from 2006. We found machines that were in closets sitting there collecting dust. We found machines that were under people's desks that we've taken out as loaners, and then the swap back never happened, so people had two computers and one of them sitting there collecting dust. And so it's been kudos to my team. They've done more in the last 2 or 3 weeks than I think has been done in a long time as far as getting a handle on what we really have. And so respectfully, I'm coming to you today to ask for so that in the next 60 days, we can get the equipment, the licensing, so on and so forth, to replace these end-of-life machines. We've got 160 people that we've got to train on a new version of Windows. There's a lot to be done in this couple months. Questions?
Patrick, I have a question in terms of the document that you were, you provided us, upgrade, replace, and migrate. So are you suggesting a staggered approach, or is there a recommendation that you're bringing to the court?
No, this is the recommendation. The total number of machines, that total there, 161 that you see, that's how many Windows XP machines we have across the county. And where possible, we're going to upgrade those machines. That's the cheapest option. Now, it's a stopgap measure, and in that I mean in a couple of years, we're going to have to come back and migrate or upgrade the hardware. But by taking those, if you look at the very top section there, there's 40, 50, 60, 70 machines or so that we'll be able to upgrade. And one of those will save about $1,400 a piece, so we upgrade what we already have. The very bottom line item here that you see, that's quantity of 40 office licenses, Microsoft Office, your Word, Excel, Outlook, and that sort of thing. The oldest version of that is also being end of life on April 8th. And so there's about 40 machines out there that need to have that upgraded in addition to the operating system. And I've been talking with David and Carrie about how we're going to fund this, and also about this estimate. This is, the numbers will come in under this, without a doubt. But I want to give you guys an idea of this.
I just want to reiterate what he said. I mean, it is a security issue. We didn't find out about it until in December when we got a letter from the state advising that would be going out, and we have to be in compliance. And not only us, but anybody that runs anything through the state will have to have that upgrade, or else we'll be non-compliant and they'll take away our access to the CJIS stuff. So
But
Like I said,
Sheriff,
it wasn't anything that we had knowledge of prior to budget time. And that's just, like I said, we won't be able to run anybody, we won't be able to run tags, anything through the state. And again, that's with the DA's office, county attorney's office. So.
and Sheriff, to add to that, and certainly Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't feel like the state has given us a mandate at this point. I think the state is dealing with, all counties have this problem, or there would be a handful, if not more, counties dealing with a similar issue. And I think the way they provided the communication was there would be some type of leeway, not that you would automatically April 1st be non-compliant with CGIS and not be able to complete those reporting cycles. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
That's not my understanding. My understanding is DPS, once you, April 1st, whenever it's end of life, you cannot, if they catch you on XP or whatever, then you're in non-compliance, they can pull your access to it.
See, that's not at least the documentation that I've seen, but I'll let you speak to that.
Right, well, since we've met, I've done some more, I've contacted some other counties, and, you know, there's two sets of requirements. One is FBI's, CGIS, and the other one is DPS. And DPS is giving a leeway, I think it's 90 days past that, because of the sheer volume. I mean, we're not the only organization, and obviously not just, you know, public sector companies aren't the only ones that are having to deal with this.
Right.
The private sector also. And it's one of those things where, you know, this needs to be addressed not just because of the CGIS requirements, but because of just the exposure to the county. Because, like I said, once the hackers out there, once they find a vulnerability in Windows XP and they come in it and grab some of the public information on our citizens or whatever, and that gets traced back to the county for rectifications. And we want to do that.
Thank you, Judge.
You mentioned the funding, or the funding was going to come from.
Dave and I discussed it, and we believe this would qualify to come from the balances of emergency. We chose to make it there. What was the other contingency?
And I think, Carrie, what makes me hesitant about this line item is we have already seen many unexpected expenditures, really first quarter into the fiscal year. And I am personally hesitant from pulling the contingency fund because we really do have a significant amount of time left in this budget cycle. Jason, is there any recommendation in terms of, I'm even hesitant to say this, but a staggered approach so that we can budget? And what I'm saying is really the terminals that do run the CGIS, the FBI or DPS, really that being the dedicated focus to bring those up into compliance and then everything else following suit?
The problem that we run into is, you know, there's machines all throughout the district clerk's office, the county attorney's office, the DA's office. The bulk of these machines, the bulk of these older machines are in the clerk's offices. So we've gone through and touched all of these, and I've just come back and, you know, give you some idea of where they're at. One reason that we wanted to get it on the agenda today, and possibly maybe the approval today to start, is because of the sheer volume of work we're looking at to try to get this finished by the 1st of April. Because this is a task. It's going to consume us for the next couple of months to try to get this taken care of.
I'm inclined to think that this is going to have to be done one way or the other. And the sooner we get on this, the better the county's going to be. So I would recommend that we get on it right now and make a decision today as to approving this fund.
And one thing I do need to add to prevent this from happening again with the next end of life. Windows 7, the current version we're on, its end of life is 2020. And so we've already put together, as I brought you guys here at budget time, a 5-year plan to get this migrated. And as part of that, you know, the way this affects that plan is instead of doing 600 machines over the next 5 years, we'll do 600 minus this 160, so about 450 machines over the next 5 years. So we're still gonna see, you know, the cost will be like here instead of later.
And just a follow-up question, how does that compromise the VDI project? Will all of that be put on hold?
No,
The virtual desktop?
No, part of this is taking about 80 or 90 machines and moving them to virtual desktop. It's going to accelerate that.
The ones that were originally purchased during the budget cycle?
We're still going, yeah, we're still using those.
Okay.
In addition, yes.
Okay.
You know, this is 160 in addition to those 20 or 25. We'll still carry over the budget.
Well, this is what makes budgeting really tough. And trying to explain to our constituents that we're living within a budget. But, this is something we have to do, I guess. What else we can do?
Very many options. I'll put it in the form of a motion, and David, do you have this figure, 143,974, is that going to be, you said it was probably not going to be that much.
It will come under that, but there's over 5,000.
Yeah, it should come in under that. I'm looking at some of those numbers, and I think by the time we start shopping it, it will come in under that. There is one piece of equipment that Jason has included in the cost of the virtual desktops that is over 5,000. So in your motion, if you could give me the authority to go ahead and purchase that one piece of equipment over 5,000. Everything else is under 5,000, those will stay within that budget amount.
Did you catch all that, Drew?
Sure.
Which piece of equipment?
For the virtual desktops, we added some equipment to our data center to house those virtual machines. So
That's the piece of equipment.
that's the one piece that's going to be over.
Could we all, if we're gonna take the money out of fund balance, could we also include in that motion a declaration that this constitutes urgent no witnesses, so we can be accepted, give an exception? Right.
Well, that'll be.
I think I was saying something about security, maybe security.
Love that for your motion, Commissioner.
You want to read all that back?
Second.
Okay, I guess we'll try this, at this time, I'll make a motion that we approve the $143,974.98 to come from the contingency, and which will include
I'm sorry, to come from the forfeiture funds.
forfeiture fund. Okay.
Fund balance.
Fund balance.
I'm sorry, I was thinking, sure. Look, you got to pay attention, you see.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Well, that would be a good place for it to come from, Sheriff.
Sheriff, would you like to volunteer? Sorry.
From the fund
Fund
balance.
balance, I'm sorry.
And also to include a purchase of over $5,000 for a piece of equipment, and the name of that equipment is?
A blade server.
A Blaze. Anything else needed to be added in the motion?
Second?
We have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor? Passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Item number 10. Elevator consultant consider an action on the following. A, awarding a contract to North American Elevator Consulting Inc. as professional service to evaluate the current elevator repairs needed with a not to exceed price of $5,000. And B, awarding a contract to North American Elevator Consulting Inc. as a professional service to evaluate the modernization of all elevators within the Santa Fe building with a not to exceed $49,900. Michael.
This was a cost proposal. Mike submitted some scopes of work for both of these projects, and I submitted it to the elevator consultant. And this is the cost proposal he came back with. I would just ask if you do approve either A or B, that we mention as an example of competitive bidding because it's professional service. That would be the only thing. Let's say.
And item B, 49,900 does require, I believe it's 40% on the sign. Item A that is presented to you today, visited with the consultant regarding this matter. Just a reminder, we want to make sure that we're spending the money properly, getting the proper equipment in, and we're not spending $50,000. In turn, removing it within a year to do the modernization. So this right here, item A requires 3 trips. Item B, the actual modernization, you can call him being the architect of the project. This right here kind of split in different phases. First one is to do an assessment of the current elevators. Then B would be to go through the bidding process, and then actually the last item would be to carry us through the project. That requires 10 trips right there. Anything over and above that is to make you aware we're looking at a cost of $1,200 per trip. Over and above those trips at $168 an hour.
Where is the recommendation, Mike, for these funds to come from?
I would take it from our Santa Fe elevator account. You're looking at 20% of that 49.9. Actually come from there this time, and then the 5,000. Kerry and I discussed that we could go ahead and take it from that account. It's already out. It's our Santa Fe elevator.
How much is in that account? How much is the annual maintenance on this?
Just like previous what we're expecting.
So Mike, your recommendation is to take the 5,000 from that line item?
Yes, and the 40% to get the project started on the modernization. This right here will probably take them 4 to 5 months to actually go through the design. That's in hopes to bring the cost to the corporate budget, where you can budget the money for these repairs. The actual $49,900 will not be all of it, because part of that fund will be used here in the actual project, for which I would estimate will last about a year and a half to 2 years.
And that's for all 4 elevators that are being reviewed at one time? I do have to say that I'm not hesitant about the repairs, but you know, we recently repaired the new doors at the Santa Fe building, and one is not in use anymore. So, you know, in my opinion, that was not the best expenditure we could have made at the time. Certainly the court did not know that when that decision was made to close down that as an entry point. I'm assuming that's not any future forecast for any of those elevators, but I would assume that traffic would be less going up and down with that
I
stop.
can tell you regarding the doors, that's,
I'm just saying that as a point of discussion.
we need these elevators operational.
And one is currently not, is that right?
Elevator number 2 is currently shut down. If we find that we cannot do the repairs to get that elevator back in operation, it will remain shut down until we do our modernization, which will start next fiscal year.
And Mike, other than the one that is not in operation today, is there a strong desire or a reason why this should happen this fiscal year as opposed to next?
The modernization is going to take the time. We need to go ahead and start the modernization design now, just to get you a cost to go to budget with. So the actual modernization, if you approve it, is not going to happen until after October 1st. Did that answer your question?
It did, I'm just, it did, thank you. Commissioner, what's your opinion on the elevator? Whether that should happen? Know that you oversee the facilities division.
Obviously, there's gonna have to be some things with those elevators, and, you know, I lean on Mike on this, and, I think whatever his recommendation, I'm not an elevator person. Don't plan on being one, and, I wish I was, because there's a lot of money to be paid for it, not bad. $159 an hour, did you say?
We could move anywhere from probably 1,200 to 1,500.
What was that? I'm sorry.
I'd say probably anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500 people a day.
I wondered what the foot traffic was, so thank you for that
Two
statistic.
elevators, just with two deaf emergencies.
Certainly get some people in shape using those stairs.
That's why we shut it down.
Right, I make a motion that we award the contract to North American Elevator Consulting. It's a professional service to evaluate the current elevator repairs, not to exceed $5,000. And also in that motion, to include North American Elevator as a professional service and funds to come from the Santa Fe elevator account.
I will motion approved, a second, all in favor?
You just do an A?
I did both,
She did.
Commissioner. Would you like me to take them separate?
No.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure.
Items A and B have been approved, 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Next, the Walnut Hills Bridge. I met with several of the Walnut Hills people, along with several people from TxDOT. It was a very well-attended meeting, and I think at the beginning there was a lot of misconception as to what was going on. I think people felt that maybe the bridge was being shoved down their throat. Basically, TxDOT gave a great explanation is that that was not happening. What was taking place, there were some surveyors out there checking with people, and I think people already felt like maybe this was a done deal. Well, I found out that it's not a done deal. They basically have to have all of this background done prior to any work or anything being done on that project. The county came into play because we had to work in conjunction with TxDOT to approve. I think we're going to do 10% of the work or 10% of the money to be spent on that project, and we were going to do it in the form of work. So I'm going to make this as short as I can. Basically, we ended up, they realized that there was a whole lot of work to be done prior to anything being done. And basically, the people out there want the bridge as is. However, it has to be upgraded. The reason this all started because we had some bridges throughout the country that were failing. And so the federal government had a study done on all of the bridges. And our bridge, Walnut Hills, was rated, and don't take this as a problem of safety, but it was rated a 15 out of 100. So basically there was a lot of work to be done with the bridge, not safety reasons, but for other reasons. There's a whole different kind of survey that they do as far as what the issues are, age, lots of other things. None of that was all brought out. There's a whole lot of things that they had to consider. So I think we all left with a better feeling than what we got started with, knowing that the work to be done. We're going to have another meeting. Don't know when that's scheduled yet, but I think the people out there going out are satisfied with what's going to take place. And like I said, they want to keep the bridge. However, it needs to be upgraded. How that's going to happen, we don't know. There's another problem was access into and out of Walnut Hills. That's not a very good solution. We don't have any solution to that right now, but the TxDOT is going to look at that project too, to see if we can't find another way into it and out of it. There's some people from Walnut Hills here. Anybody want to speak to this? Come on up here and Jared, yeah?
I really don't have anything to say.
Okay, did I cover pretty much what
Yes, I think you did,
discussed?
and especially the idea that when it first started, there was a lot of misapprehension or misinformation apprehension that I think that you and TxDOT took care of pretty well. I wasn't there until the very end of the meeting. So.
One of the biggest issues, I guess people saw online, how much the project was going to cost. Well, actually, that was the funding that was being allowed, whether you put in a new bridge, work on the old bridge. I mean, it was a figure over $600,000. So that kind of came to people's attention. They were a little nervous about that. They kind of had a feeling that this is already done. It was going to be done the way that the TxDOT wanted to do it. That, like I said, that's been resolved. So Yes,
I do believe something will be done by about 2016.
right, there's like I said, the Walnut Hills people, are going to be the ones that are going to, let TxDOT know what they want done. That's the final.
The county also, we get, to do our part, I think it was $76,000, which took care of our part.
Right.
And, but we still, there's electric and there's, gas is gonna have to be moved, and that will come out of counties.
Those are all things that, we'll hopefully find out a lot more in the future at our next meeting.
And my question, why wasn't we invited, my commissioner, and Road and Bridge to that meeting?
I was invited, I don't know. I got an invite from the Walnut Hills folks, and
Okay, just curious.
I'll put you on, I'll make sure you're on the list to go to.
So at least I didn't know what it was. So, anyway, thank you.
Anybody else, want to make a comment about that project? There's a whole lot of work to be done before any final things are taken into consideration on that. Okay. Item number 12, continuing education. A, county clerk, the completion of required 20 hours of continuing education for 2013 as prescribed in 51.605 of the Texas Government Code. And I think I've got something from Mr. Edith Smith there.
That's a copy.
Well, I'm going to give it to you anyway. Let you know that I do have it. And part B of that, district clerk completion of 20 hours of continuing education for 2013 as prescribed by 51.605 Texas Government Code for Carolyn Woodburn. So you also recognize. And item 13, Park County Emergency Communications District Board of Managers to consider an action upon reappointing Sheriff Thomas to the Board of Managers for the 9/11 Communications District. Mr. Green, how are you today?
I'm well. Thank you, Judge and the Commissioners, for making a little time for a little housekeeping for 911. My name is Greg Green. I'm the Executive Director of your 911 District. Very brief history. We don't answer or respond to 911 calls at the 911 District. Our team at 405 Southwest 8, we are more or less responsible for bringing those requests for assistance to the proper 911 call center. Whether it's Potter County Sheriff's Office, Randall County Sheriff's Office, Amarillo Emergency Communications Center, or the West Texas A&M Police Department. We also do public education. We do all the mapping that supports the responders, and quite a bit of training also. So when I tell people what I do, they all automatically think we answer 911 calls, and that's not in our purview. The housekeeping I mentioned earlier, our enabling statute is Texas Health and Safety Code 772. Section 306 of that code relates to the Board of Managers. It not only tells you composition, but also describes the terms of service. In a nutshell, that is a 2-year term, and it's been about 2 years since we've appointed Sheriff Brian Thomas to represent Potter County on that board. Sheriff has been a wonderful board member. He is a regular attender, maybe perfect attendance, I'm not sure, I didn't bring in charge. But he serves conscientiously and has the best interests of Potter County, its citizens, as they relate to 911. So it's my recommendation that Sheriff Brian Thomas be reappointed for another 2-year term. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Green, the only question I have is if there's a limitation of terms.
There are no limitations, sorry.
Can we extend that term to 6 years maybe?
I'd be more
No,
comfortable
he's gonna have to go for re-election. We probably think it's 2.
Is there anyone else that represents Potter County other than Sheriff Thomas on that board?
No, ma'am. And to the composition of that, all this is outlined in the statute. The city of Amarillo has 2 members, Potter County 1, Randall County 1, and the incorporated communities in both counties are represented by Bud Cochran, a Timber Creek resident.
Mr. Chair, I move to reappoint Sheriff Thomas to the Board of Managers for the 911 Communications District.
Second.
A motion to approve, a second, all in favor? Passes 4-0.
Thank you for serving on that, Sheriff.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yes. You want to add that to the motion, please?
So the motion will now read,
This is item number 9.
I'm sorry, I'm, just so we can go back and clarify the emergency purposes.
Okay.
It'll now read, motion to approve $143,974.98, to come from the fund balance, and it should read for an emergency purchase, which includes a purchase of $5,000 for a blade server.
And I second that.
Item 14, Northwest Texas Hospital System Indigent Care Agreement. Consider contracted to approve an amendment to the agreement with Northwest Texas Hospital, sharing expenses for indigent medical care in the Potter County Detention Center.
I think we didn't talk about this last meeting, and I did not have the updated agreement for you to look at, so I passed it to this meeting. The only change in our long-standing agreement with Northwest Texas is the percentage of coverage, and after our audits last year that the county does in connection with the hospital district, for this year, Northwest Texas will be responsible for 89.9% of medical expenses for indigent care, and Potter County covers 10.1% of those. So that's really the only percentage that's changed in this agreement. Everything else remains the same.
Is that an increase?
I think that is an increase for us. I think last year, is that right?
It's an increase in cost
Yeah.
for us. Yes.
Yeah.
We were at 90.4% of our income last, 9.6.
Yeah, it kind of varies right around, it stays right around 90% almost the whole time. But we are responsible for a little bit more this year than last year.
Dave, on the second item of that, it's referencing paragraph 10, and I'm not sure that I understand the statement. The county will do all things lawful within its power to obtain, maintain, and properly request and pursue funds for which the payments are due under this contract. Is there something that we do as a result of that?
No, I mean, that's just kind of standard language contract. Frankly, we probably could leave that out. It's been quite a, as far as the amendment, like the boilerplate that's stuck around.
Aren't they just saying if we don't pay,
Yeah.
they can terminate?
Yeah. Right.
And Dave, is the original contract the one dated October 20th of 2004 on file?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to abstain from the motion and the vote because I'd like to reference the original contract and see the revisions, but I'm not to impede with business. But I do want to.
I'm not sure what, I mean, what's your?
The original contract, this is referencing the changes, the amendment to the contract, but I don't have the original one to reference.
And so
Usually
you
we
don't-
have the contract to
You want to
reference.
see the original one before you vote?
Correct.
There's been other amendments, so I didn't think, so you need to see all of them.
No, if you have the original contract in this amendment, you will be up to date. And the only thing that's changed from 2004 is the percentage of those.
Yes. And there's certainly a working form here, and I'm not impeding the county business, and it's my right to abstain.
Yeah, we do, this is another thing we do, so. And I'll refresh your memory of why we do this. Since there is a hospital district that's responsible for indigent care, technically, we would have to go in, every prisoner we had, and qualify them for indigent care in order to get, and then the hospital district, we were responsible for paying for that. And so, years ago, we reached this agreement with Northwest, making it easier. Rather than do that, we do a quarterly review of the, we take a random sample of the files of prisoners that are out there, and we review and determine how many of those, that percentage are indigent. So using that, we kind of get an estimate of what the indigent population of the jail is. So in short, this is telling you that 90% of the prisoners in jail are indigent, would meet the qualifications for indigent care in hospital districts. So that's much easier than just going, than determining every individual that comes through that jail. And it's easier for the hospital, it's easier for us, it's been a working deal. And I'll tell you, there is one exception. If you read the original agreement, there is one exception. There are some big ticket medical expenses that are not covered by this agreement. We have to kind of work those out. So occasionally we'll get a prisoner comes through with a major medical issue, and they will, we have to negotiate those separately. For the most routine care, this takes care of the cost and makes things a little easier for everybody.
I move we approve the amendment to the agreement with Northwest Texas Hospital System, sharing expenses for indigent medical care in Collier County in the detention center.
We have a motion to approve in a second. All in favor? All opposed?
And
All
abstaining.
abstained? Okay, we have vote 3-1. One abstention. Item 15, Tri-State Fairgrounds Waterline easement to approve interlocal agreement with the city of Emerald relocation certain water lines on the Tri-State Fairgrounds. It's item A, B, to approve granting easement to the city of Emerald for existing water lines on the fairgrounds.
Wonderful.
Aye.
We've got, this really covers two items of business. One is, we're doing this, and one is kind of a deal with the existing water line that's, we need to relocate. You'll see, we got a diagram, you'll see it. Mine's the difference on struggling with it. Down here, at the bottom of your, well, you should, in your packet, you've got a map of the existing water line that needs to be moved. So the first order of business is to, we'll approve a interlocal agreement between the city and the county that will authorize this water line to be moved so it's not underneath the building. And then we will pay a share of the cost of that, the county will. And then to clean up, there are a number of water lines on the Tri-State Fairgrounds that have been there forever. Almost forever, but and no real, ordinarily you would have an easement for those water lines so that the city could get in and do their work without any, without any hindrance. That's just a protection for everybody, and it should have been done originally, but was not. So the second part that we're asking you to do is to approve an agreement with water line easements, and by signing this agreement, we will give an easement to the city for the existing water lines that are there on the Tri-State Fairgrounds, and we won't have to deal with that issue when it comes up. Is that a fair statement, guys?
And I'm Floyd Hartman, Assistant Director of Utilities for the City of Emerald. I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Because I went through the meeting and I was very impressed with the meeting and how all that took place, and Floyd was very gracious to come to that meeting and explain everything to us. And I think all those that were there didn't have any problems with what we were talking about this morning.
And just to confirm, our fairground partners were a part of that meeting and had an opportunity to ask questions and answers. What about the relocation of the water lines? Will that impede any future development over those water lines? If there was a vision to build something X amount of years from now, and it resides over one of these main water lines, can you help me understand that?
That's what this whole issue is about the construction of the roping arena. And it did get constructed. On the back page of your agreement, there's a diagram that shows where the new roping arena got constructed over one of these water mains. The process that's in place to prevent that is the review process during application of building permits by the city, which shows where the easements are. Since the easements don't exist, the review process didn't catch that this was going to be constructed over that line. So the process actually gets to be corrected with these easements. The county still has the ability to build anywhere they want only the resolution of moving water mains would be resolved prior to construction instead of after the fact. That's what this does. It really clarifies and gets us to a place to where it's resolved prior to issues arising rather than after the fact. That's what occurred in this instance that required the moving of this water.
So just to make sure I'm following you, if the county chose to build on that property or the fairgrounds, it could be either entity, because we really both kind of reside on that property. If either entity decides to build, there's an application process, and we have to go to the city for permitting that looks at the easements. And if there are financial implications to move the easements, does the city take that impact, or does the county take that impact?
When the county wants to build a new building, they would be responsible for moving the water line and the easement. So if the city takes the initiative to move the water line, then it's at our expense. So whoever initiates the project would be responsible for those expenses.
And what's an average cost to move away, and maybe even just take this project into scope for the moving of the easement lines?
Easements
Or
are
not the actual documentation, the work that goes behind
the
it.
water lines.
Yes, the water lines.
The water lines vary in size and location, and this project, in proximity with this one, it's open spaces on the south side of that, to our knowledge. And so the estimated cost here of $35,000 for 355 feet of pipe is typically very accurate. What we would find is if there's something unknown, say there's a power line that we don't know about or nobody else knows about, that could change the cost. But that cost, the estimate here per foot, is very similar cost to other projects. That city crews installed, when we go out to external contractors, that cost typically goes up. So we're offering city crews under these conditions to minimize the expense.
And so are the blue lines, if I'm following this diagram correct, where the anticipated movement of the water lines are, probably to the south end, following up the, south end of the Dick Bivens Stadium too?
The majority of the blue lines that you see on the map, I don't know which one you're looking at, but the ones that are up on the display are the existing blue lines, are city water mains.
Okay.
And we're asking for easements on all the existing, including the ones south of Bivens Stadium. And then on the eastern portion of the project where you see the blue lines, we're asking for easements so that we don't have this issue in the future. The one line in proximity to the roping arena that comes from Grand Street, and it's on the attachment, final page attachment of the agreement.
Yeah, we don't have a copy of the agreement, sir.
You should have.
I don't have.
I sent one out. You should have.
Well, if I can,
Sure.
I'll hand this one to you and pass it around. That's the back page of the agreement. And it shows the location of the new line versus the existing line. And all we propose to do is, and if I might point at that, the south building in the southeast corner, take the line that's up on top, the existing blue line, yes, and move it to the south side. That way it's not under a structure.
But as a part of that is the granting of the easements.
Yes.
So then that initiates the application, the permitting process.
In any future process, it would initiate the permitting process correctly.
What about that line that goes under the food court?
We proposed updating that. There are no services provided beyond that. And one of the main purposes of all these lines is to provide fire protection during events. And
So they have water out there for campers and stuff, but many of their events, they have.
That's on
That's a
another
different
system. There are county-owned systems out there and city-owned systems. So there's a combination of both on the property. What you're seeing is what we've identified as city-owned. Does that help? Any other questions?
So today, and I don't need to rehash this, I just want to make sure I'm understanding, so thank you for being patient with me. For the south end of the parking lot, today, those are existing water line, and I'm sorry, I'm referencing the Dick Bivens Stadium. To the south end of that, those are existing water lines, but there's no easement on that today.
Right, in the past, business interaction between the two entities was on an informal manner.
Sure.
And we don't do business that way for liability reasons, insurance reasons, and all kinds of issues that arise nowadays that didn't arise, that we weren't concerned with. So we are just basically cleaning up the method by which those lines were installed originally.
And just to give you a quick little piece of background of information that's been presented to this court, so the footprint of these lines is quite interestingly, it caught my eye. This court has been asked to do several things with that particular piece of property, utilities being one of them, to go underground or to go above ground. So it's essentially a very similar footprint, which is catching my eye in the form of a caution. So certainly nothing to do with the easements directly, but the footprint of that is making me cautious, so.
Well, and one advantage to the filed easements would be that your other utility companies would know where we're at, which would enhance the ability to do what you're talking about.
Right, which leads me back to a previous discussion at the court of how that had been addressed. I mean, we really had some significant studies that were addressed and provided to the court, and the fact that there was not an easement is something that you would think would have been addressed before that came before.
There wasn't an easement, that's the problem. I think that's what we're
No,
trying to do.
but that didn't stop that process, when we were approached, to do the utilities underground. And I want to say maybe that was 6 to 8 months ago, may not have been that long ago, but, okay. I think that's all my questions. Thank you very much for being patient with me.
I'd like to take these separately if we could, and I move that we approve the grant of easement to the city of Amarillo for existing water lines on the Tri-State Fairgrounds.
And I'll second. Motion to approve in a second, all in favor?
Are you opposed, Judge?
Yeah.
I'm opposed.
I'm sorry.
You give us a reason why you would be opposed.
Wait a minute.
This here is going to be, this right here is going to be a ban. I guess one of the questions they may have, Floyd is right here with the city of Amarillo.
Yeah.
Part of this line actually runs into the property. Y'all addressed it.
AISDs?
Yes.
Yes, we haven't addressed it with AISD at this point. But yes, it does transfer to AISD there and comes back to Potter County property there.
Well,
Another thing this easement is to do is if we had a water main break out there, the city would be responsible for the repairs or replacement of the parking lot under this easement.
It formalizes that. We've been doing that all along. It formalizes that. Can I help you answer that? Sure.
ban.
Is it bad? Is that what you're saying?
From here out, there's a meter down here. You all have a meter location right here, so we can ban this point out. This all stays in service so that you're maintaining fire coverage.
Yes.
Okay?
There'll be a layout.
And we're moving this from here to here so we can maintain the fire hydrants in service. Okay?
We will revote. All those in favor, item A, B, I'm sorry, B, okay.
Right.
I thought we were doing individual.
Yeah, but I said, number B is just the granting of the easement. A is approving the interlocal.
Yeah, 2-2 on that, so did you want to change your vote?
No. Yes.
Okay. So item A, we'll take revote. All in favor?
We don't have a motion.
No.
on that.
Did
Did you make a motion for item
No, I did
Yeah, but-
A and B.
Okay.
Yeah, he's talking about item B, so you have a 2-2 vote on that first motion. You can go ahead and restate your motion, yes. And take another vote.
Here, can you state the motion, Commissioner?
Yes, I move to grant an easement to the city of Amarillo for the existing water lines of the Tri-State Fairgrounds.
Motion to approve, I'll second. All in favor? All opposed? Passes 3-1.
Item B? and I'll copy you.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, I know that we discussed this issue before, and I'm happy to give you a copy of the envelope. One time I gave you guys a copy of the envelope. If I forgot to give you another copy for this meeting, I apologize for that. And I'm happy if you want to postpone it. Quite frankly, there's nothing in there that needs to be reviewed by the court. It ought to be just approved automatically. I'm happy that if you want to postpone it, we can certainly. The only issue in there is the division that might be a controversy is the cost. If you split the cost with the city, it's estimated at $35,000. That's the new water line. That's the only issue I think. Other than that, it's purely a board way. So but if you want to continue it or you want to take a break and look at it, I'll be happy to provide that copy of the envelope.
Well, I'm gonna entertain a motion that we approve item A to approve an interlocal agreement with the city of Amarillo, relocation certain water lines on Tri-State Fairgrounds. Second. We have a motion approved and second. All in favor?
No, who made the motion, I'm sorry?
I did.
Okay, you made it, okay, I'm sorry.
All in favor? Passes 3-1.
I'll abstain, Commissioner, and not vote against.
Okay. Passes 3 with 1 abstention.
Thank you for being here.
Item 16, racial profiling report to recognize the annual racial profiling reports prepared by the sheriff and constables. You all have a chance to look at those. Any questions?
Sheriff, I just have one question on this report. I noticed an exemption was filed. Is that typical to file that exemption? Or no, that I've seen that before?
It's on there because we have the video cameras and stuff, it's always on there.
Okay, I'm not sure that caught my eye, so I just wanted to confirm it. I didn't know if this was the first time you were filing an exemption. Okay, thank you.
So next. 17, prohibition on outdoor fires. Consider act upon the prohibition on the outdoor burning presented to 352-.081, the local government code. Richard, I haven't seen you in a while. Come on up here and see what you look like. I remember that guy.
Same old guy.
I remember him.
I'm gonna ask that we go ahead and put the burn ban back on. We're hitting our dry spell. Moisture hasn't been, yearly moisture right now is 0.3. It should be over half an inch moisture for the year. We've started seeing an increase in activity. Roadside starts have been the most prevalent. We've had a lot of people that are now going out burning their pits, and we're starting to have problems. So I think it's time we put the burn ban back on until we get significant moisture. Through the early spring is typically the worst part of the fire season for the Texas Panhandle. It's usually where we see what they refer to as our historical fires. So I think if we try to limit the outdoor burning and keep some control on it, that it would be a benefit to us throughout the spring season. And then we can look at what our moisture is doing after that. Because even if we get snow or rain this time of year, it's going to dry off pretty quick and still have a fire problem. So we're looking at the energy release components that have just come out, and they're as high as they've been in a long time. We're starting to hit high fire dangers almost every day, and red flag 2 different times a week. So it's time to look at putting it back.
I noticed that in the paper this morning is the drought, I guess the worst, and it's almost the dust bowls, I guess there's one worst.
Yeah, we're predicted to stay in what they call persistent drought, which means even though you're getting rainfall, you're never really recovering from what happened. And that's kind of where we're at with the fire situation is. Last week we had, light snow, and at the same time as snowing, we had a grass fire going on in the medium. So, even when you're having moisture, it's not having any effect on the fires.
I will make a recommendation that we consider, that we do, was it 90 days?
Yes.
90-day burn ban.
Second?
Motion approved and second. All in favor? Passes 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you, and if anything changes, I'll bring it back. If we get significant moisture, then I'll bring it back for reevaluation. Yes, hope so.
Item 18, Time Clock Plus, to hear an update on the timeline of implementation of the county timekeeping software and purchase from the Data Management Incorporated.
Good morning. Just to provide you a little update on the Time Clock Plus, HR and IT were grouped and brought on to the Time Clock Plus system. HR began implementation on November 1st, and IT went live on December 1st. Both departments have been functioning and reporting time through Time Clock Plus. We have encountered a few slight issues along the way. Most recently, it was determined that there was some discrepancies in the compensatory time calculation. Those discrepancies have been isolated and means to correction has been determined, and I plan to make those corrections this week on that. The transition of our payroll coordinator position has had a significant impact on the staging of the Time Clock Plus system, due in part to just the workflow through HR and payroll, since our payroll coordinator is an integral part of this process. And the timing that occurred in the transition, because it's year-end for payroll presents a significant work volume and unique issues that are incurred only once a year. And we are in the mix of all that as we speak. Our new payroll coordinator did come on December 12th, and she's been learning very well. I commend her for her ability to step up and really begin processing in some difficult times. We did have some specialized training provided by Jessica Pepper, who led paying specific attention to our year-end processes, but we have experienced some unexpected barriers related to those various processes. Part of them were inherent, I think, in transitioning from one user to another user, flat file processing, those kind of things. We've just had some issues with getting processes to work as smoothly as they may have had there not been a transition. So they've taken some time to do. One of the year-end processes that created some pretty significant problems was the processing of the W-2 forms. We had lots of issues involved in that, but they were printed late Friday, yay, to everyone's pleasure, I think. We are in process now of folding and stuffing them. They'll go out tomorrow or Wednesday, and then be mailed to previous employees and retirees also on Tuesday or Wednesday. The time will be scheduled with CSCD, with our new payroll coordinator, with Veronica and myself, hopefully the first or second week in February, so we can begin to spend some very specific time with Time Clock Plus and Veronica, and let her view how that system works and how it processes. Then immediately following that, we'll begin detailed training in HR and later spend some time on Time Clock Plus. During that time, we'll develop the training materials that are going to be used to do the departmental trainings during the staging. And I anticipate that Veronica and I will work together in that staging and implementation process, and that stage 2 will begin implementation in March. I do have what we anticipate to be the breakout and staging of the departments that have agreed to come on to time clock class, and can provide that to you today. Of course, subsequent timing for the staging beyond stage 2 will be dependent upon issues and how quickly they are resolved. But we plan to put that information out to the department heads, the staging schedule out to department heads in March, and schedule time for training immediately before each group of departments are staged in. Hopefully, we'll be staging departments in 2-week intervals, possibly 1-month intervals once we begin the actual staging.
And will you be involving the IT department through that process?
Absolutely.
I know you mentioned your payroll coordinator.
Absolutely. We'll be using the IT meeting area or work center for training, so that's what we had discussed previously, and all of that will be confirmed as we move forward.
Okay. And Jason, just a follow-up question. You're actively using the timekeeping system as well?
Yes, all of my guys are on it, like she says, it's the end of November, first November.
Okay. Well, thank you for that recap, Kay. And I did reach out to Kay and just let her know that I was going to put this on the agenda for an update. The Commissioners Court took this on as an initiative last fiscal year for the purchase due to a lack of no formal timekeeping system countywide. And so salaries, just that line item, not even taking into account the benefits, are roughly 40 to 50% of our budget. I'm looking at Carrie to correct me if I have that statistic wrong, but I mean, it's a significant expenditure, in my opinion, to have a formal process on those checks and balances. So thank you for that.
And I will certainly put this back on the agenda. Follow up in April. Is that?
Yeah, that's right. And you'll get us the staging 2 implementation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
No action on this item. Item 19, elections, to hear and discuss the report on the vote centers and consider scheduling your work session with Loving County officials to get more information. And Lynn is here.
Morning. Good morning. In early January, I went to a conference down in Austin of the elections officials and gained a little bit more knowledge about vote centers. One of the things that came to light was an official from the Secretary of State basically said to all the counties they want us to look at moving towards vote centers. That's their vision for Texas. Some of the exceptions, of course, would be the counties that are very, very remote, very rural, and there's no technology for it. That's where I led in this report. It's not in law at this point. I think if we're looking at something that's not going to be a matter of if, but it will be a matter of when, that this will happen. I discussed the vote centers with the elections administrator from Lubbock County, and one of my questions was, how do you affect voter turnout? Do we have more people that show up at the polls? And she says, absolutely not. For them, it was just pretty much a wash as far as their voting totals. But she said their benefit has been an approximate 40% decrease in their election costs. Wasn't initially because they had to have some equipment to get started, but at this point they're operating and able to run elections for less money. So in bringing some of these ideas to light, we felt like it was time to look at this. Lubbock County has volunteered for the EA and one of their commissioners to come to Amarillo for a work session, a 2-hour work session. They have offered this to us. They have asked that we bring in commissioners because we absolutely need commissioner support. Our elections commission, our county chairs from the Republicans and the Democratic parties. And really what they want people who are for it and the people who are against it, so we can all sit down and they can answer questions. For Lubbock County, it's worked, they've kind of become the leader in Texas on this. as to how to do it. Obviously, there's some concerns in the aging population in Potter County. We don't want to leave our voters behind. And the remoteness of Potter County and being able to locate fewer polling locations and still make voting convenient to our population. But, you know, I just kind of wanted to bring you up to date as to where we were and see if you guys would be interested in me scheduling a work session.
Well, that would be a benefit to all of us, especially the commissioners.
And kudos to Lebanon County, they would be willing to travel and come here and bring a commissioner and their elections administrator to really be a part of the process. Doesn't happen often.
Have a
We already have a group that has met once.
And, you know, and I'm hoping, you may have some history on that as to who all was on that. I'm having a hard time piecing that through the transition together as to everybody there, but that group should also be in on this.
Well, it's the two commissioners and myself, Commissioner Bond.
I think the minutes reflect who was on that, original.
And it was, the two county chairs. Jason was there, IT, and PDA.
Well, I would certainly welcome, and I'm not sure if you need this in the form of a motion, Dave, or what your opinion would be. We need this as a motion to move forward with a working session, if you will.
Look here. You really are just
I just wanted
to hear a report, but I mean, if you, we can certainly put it on the agenda for next time, but when it, you know, commission would like to.
I'm just not sure if she needs a motion to move forward with scheduling a working session.
That's what I'm saying. Really, I would, yeah, you can go ahead and do a motion, I'll let you do that.
Okay. I make a motion.
Since no action will really be taken,
Yes,
so.
yes. Okay. I make a motion to allow Malin to schedule a working meeting with, regarding vote centers to include Lubbock County Commissioner and Election Administrator and involve constituents of the county.
Thank you very much.
Sarah, okay.
motion, have a second? I'll second. All in favor? That's 4-0. Item 20, employment items. Consider and act upon the following employment item. Facilities maintenance to the resignation of John Michael Walker, mechanic technician 2, effective 1/24.
Make a motion that we accept the employment items as presented.
Second, all in favor? Passes 4-0. Okay, item 21, Potter County projects, to hear a report on various Potter County projects and take any action necessary.
We didn't have a handout this time, so.
No, for the second one I did not provide, I just got a brief report. If we could go back to item number 10, please. I just want to clarify, I want y'all to understand something, which is actually part of my report here. You have approved the consulting services for the elevator consultant. Just please keep in mind what I presented to you a while back. We had a probable cost out there of around $50,000 to do this repair. Depending upon our assessment with the elevator consultant on item A, spending the $5,000, and we may bring it back to you, we expend that money, or do not expend it, I'm just making it clear. If we do expend it, I'll be bringing another request to you for the additional probable cost of the project. Regarding the Texas Historic Commission projects here at the county courthouse, our area roads have started, we can start to go through and put them in the building. It's going to take a lot of weekend work. We can't just go in and lift people's desks up while they're trying to work. So we're going to schedule this probably throughout the next 2 months to go in and do some of this on the weekends. The request that I presented to the Texas Historic Commission for them to be responsible for the additional, I think around $5,600 for the acoustical project.
They went to, their quarterly meeting this past Thursday. I had a call in to the Texas Fiscal Commission. Have not received a response back, but once I do that, I'll let you know. The handrail project for County Court of Law 2, right now, the final design is being reviewed for approval.
And Dave, just a follow-up question to that, because I know the court got a formal order of some type. Have you followed up? You indicated there was no formal action we needed to take in reference to that court order that we received?
That's correct.
That's, okay.
That's correct. We
Nothing
invested
had changed. Okay.
They're made aware, they've been involved.
Okay.
In this whole process. I believe you have an item on the agenda to go to executive session regarding general construction. Santa Fe elevator project. Hail damage. To make you aware on the Santa Fe building, we completed for the lightweight concrete, the additional work last Thursday. It's all completed. The crane was removed this weekend. We will look to complete the remaining roof work up there. I actually put the covering down, even though it's totally waterproof right now, you get another roof system on top of it. We ought to complete that around the mid part of February. We anticipate to start the Sheriff's Department project around February 27th. I'll be calling a meeting with everybody involved third week. That is expected to last through the month of March. The non-emergency hail damage projects, just to make you aware, due to the response that we did receive back from the forensic engineers as brought in by TAC, we'll go ahead and include the Rex Baxter Cody building on the current hail damage unless we're directed otherwise by the court. I mean, I don't know how else you want to proceed. All they're going to do is do some repairs out there. The version of them is in total disagreement.
Did you want to make mention of the sinkhole that we?
That's what I was coming out on here. The Santa Fe South parking lot, back when we originally did the project, we had a basement there. We had busted a hole through the bottom of it. Last week, Tech America was driving one of their lifts across it, actually sunk the right tire. We found part of the original sinkhole, so we Road and Bridge, my hats off to them. They did a great job. Roger and his staff, they excavated a hole 38 foot long by 8 foot wide and over 3 foot deep through that parking lot. They have it repairing. I think we're looking at Wednesday to put the asphalt back down on the parking lot. So I will not open the parking lot back up until after we get this work completed.
And we're very fortunate it didn't have a lot more to it.
Yeah, a lot more to it. We would have probably had to bring in somebody else. Roger and his crew, like I said, they did a great job. They saved the county a lot of money.
Good job, Roger.
Thank you.
But Mike, what do you think would have caused that? Is it the heavy machinery that's been on that would cause that to
Due
maybe
to,
come back?
when you see sinkholes at that time, like I said, that was part of the old basement that was there. Within the first year and a half after we'd actually done the parking lot project, we had a sinkhole come up. We actually used flow fill, concrete filled it full of what little area it was. This is just where some water is getting up underneath the parking lot, eventually just seeping up underneath the road. You actually had about 16 inches, including the base and your asphalt on top, that actually created a bridge. We could drive certain pieces of equipment on it, no problem, but that one piece of equipment kept it in. So I don't have any other concerns on any other portion. The volunteer fire station, Richard, do y'all have any further information on real estate or anything?
I think Pat's included everybody in the emails, the last ones that he's had.
We haven't heard anything back.
No, you know, there's 3 or 4 properties we're looking at. I think to really talk about them, I'd like to go to executive session, maybe in the future, coordinate. But there are options out there. It just comes down to money.
And the last project, the correctional facility, the emergency project we had out there, we had a meeting last week. We'll have another one this coming Friday. We hope to conclude all excavation around this Friday. Then the plumbing is looking to start for a 2-week duration, the first 2 full weeks of February. This work will be done at night time, so we do not shut down the kitchen, something we did not originally anticipate.
Then, we will hope to go through our inspections latter part of February, and then we'll look at the month of March to even as we're looking at everything that we're doing. Plus to install those stainless steel systems.
Mike, I just have one question on the second item, the area rugs about the
Yes.
weekend coverage. Is that causing an increase in overtime pay or how is that working?
What I normally do right there, I bring employees in and I have funds to where I've had positions open, I have not filled, we have those additional funds, that's what I utilize to pay them.
New employees coming in or new?
I have positions that I've been waiting to fill, so we have funds available that use those funds to compensate them. What I try to do is, I will compensate the employees for coming in, especially if it is an emergency, but this is, but I've got the funds, I'll compensate them for that. What I also look to do is work it around, depending on the size of our crew, if we have anybody on vacation, and if we do not, we'll try to work it in where some of the guys may not come in on Friday. They may, come in on Saturday or something like that. Just depending on the time, we'll try to work that in.
Let's skip item 22, go to item 23, hold executive session if necessary on the vote. Have any, you're going to include for the next one? Our next property, we're gonna, you think you'll be ready for that one?
I don't know that we'll be ready to take action, but we can give you a more detailed update.
Okay, well, all right. Jail report, we have 536, 91 female. Don't keep getting going down, just sure.
Sheriff, have we had to send any off to Childress is the county with the contract, is that right? Okay, I saw that on the vouchers this time for December, some of those